North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We report the news honestly, truthfully. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary and we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. We usually do it Monday through Friday from 2 until 5 p.m. live Central Time, except this week I got work. Yeah, I've got some work here. I am a Texas State Guardsman, proudly. I work for the governor of Texas along with this job, and from time to time I have duties that take me away from this job. And the story about that is that I have a wonderful opportunity to go and train some of the Texas State Guard's newest non-commissioned officers. And I have had the high privilege of being able to do that now for almost, I guess it's been 12 years. For 12 years I've been doing this. And we have an academy coming up, and I just wanted to say that I'll be gone tomorrow and Friday, but I will return on Monday as we close in on the 2022 election. And that has been amazing. There were debates all over the place, gubernatorial debates, including Zeldin versus Hochul. Lee Zeldin wants to diselect, except she wasn't actually elected, Ms. Hochul, Kathy Hochul, who is the sitting governor of Texas. She took over when Andrew Cuomo left his post. So they squared off last night in their first and only debate. And I've got something to say about that. We need more debates, not less. We need more debates. We need these people interacting with each other more. We need to have more than one chance to see these people actually compare what they wish to do with their elected job if they win it. And we don't get enough of that. And we need to make sure that in the future, those debates are more important than not. Just a personal opinion. So Hochul, a Democrat seeking her first full term, fended off rapid-fire jabs from Zeldin and promoted her 14-month record as governor. Zeldin, buoyed by recent polls showing him trailing by modest margins, seized the televised platform to pummel his opponent. This, by the way, is from USA Today, so there may be a bit of a bias in some of this. Zeldin heatedly went after Hochul on crime, a focus of his campaign, and the topic that took up nearly the first quarter of the debate. He assailed Democrats for cashless bail, a 2019 law restricting the jailing of defendants before trial, and vowed to declare a state of emergency to suspend that and other criminal justice reforms to force the Democrat-led legislature, to change them. Hochul defended public safety steps she has taken or pledged, such as installing surveillance cameras on subways and steering the conversation to gun violence, questioning why Zeldin didn't support doing in Congress a step that New York took this year, raising the minimum age for buying semi-automatic rifles to 21. Zeldin retorted the governor had said nothing in her answers about locking up criminals. People are at home waiting for action. Then Hochul, in her milder way, landed jabs repeatedly tying Zeldin to Donald Trump, a potential turnoff for independent voters, and noting the congressman's votes to reject electoral votes of two states President Joe Biden won in 2020. She called Zeldin an election denier and used her one question asking opportunity to ask her opponent if she thought Trump was a great president. Zeldin responded indirectly by reeling off what he thought were positive actions taken during Trump's term. I'll take that as a resounding yes, and the voters of New York do not agree with you, said Kathy Hochul. The exchange on how to improve New York's economy sailed past without much elaboration back and forth. Zeldin then targeted pay-to-play and Bills Stadium subsidy. The Republicans zeroed in on two vulnerabilities, a major contract given without bidding to a Hochul campaign contributor, and a massive subsidy the state agreed to pay for the construction of a new Buffalo Bills stadium. Zeldin accused Hochul of corruption for her administration's paying $637 million for COVID-19 home test kits to a New Jersey company whose owner donated more than $300,000 to her campaign through himself and his family members. Hochul denied any link between the contracts and the contributions, explained the state had scrambled them scrambled then to secure ample testing for students to return to in-person instruction. And so there you go. The necessary for a Democrat, that is, targeting on abortion happened. Hochul, whose campaign blasted Zeldin in TV ads for opposing abortion rights, went after him for sponsoring an anti-abortion bill in Congress. And that is something that the Democrats are going to keep pounding on and keep pounding on and keep pounding on until they get over it, I suppose. All right. So there you go. Then there was this one. This one was the John Fetterman, Dr. Oz debate. It is a key Senate race, and it is awful. It is truly terrible. I watched some of the debate, and I can't understand why people in politics can be so amazingly cruel to someone who is suffering. This is not a partisan statement. This is a human statement. John Fetterman is truly having difficulty. And I've said several times, based on things that I've watched and things that he has said, that this is a guy who needs to spend more time on his recovery than attempting to run for the United States Senate. Should he run some other time? Sure. Once he's recovered, as opposed to recovering, that would be fine, in my view, if he chooses to. But John Fetterman is not up to the job. And it must be frustrating for him to be in that situation. That being said, that is the situation he is in. We'll discuss more about that coming up in just a couple of seconds. But the reporting goes like this from USA Today. Pennsylvania Senate candidates John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz squared off last night in their race's first and only debate, a bruising encounter shaped in part by the Democrats' lingering communications difficulties following a stroke. The event came exactly 2 weeks before the election in the contest, which could determine the tilt of the United States Senate. Though Fetterman held a sizable polling lead over his GOP rival throughout the summer, Oz has been whittling away at the advantage as Election Day gets closer. And recent surveys have suggested the candidates are now neck and neck. The hour-long debate, which took place in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, covered topics including crime, the economy, and abortion, gave voters the opportunity to evaluate Fetterman's recovery from a life-threatening stroke that he suffered this year. Oz has been pressing for more debates, a setting in which even Fetterman's team acknowledges the Republican, a former TV talk show host, has an inherent advantage. Fetterman agreed to only the Tuesday night event, which was broadcast across the state and streamed on about a dozen websites. My personal opinion, if he doesn't withdraw from the election completely, the only thing that I can say is that if I was advising him, I'd say no more debates. No more debates. I would try to very carefully craft his public appearances so that his weaknesses would be masked, if possible. And I would essentially develop a, shall we say, or adapt the Biden basement policy and see what they can do about winning this election without John Fetterman being able to communicate with the people, because I think that's his best chance. In a memo sent to the reporters, Fetterman campaign advisors admitted this isn't John's format, all the more because the candidate had experienced a stroke that had affected his communications. The Democrat lingering auditory processing issues means that sometimes he misses words if it's spoken to him or stumbles when he's talking, but the campaign has released a physician's letter stating the candidate is not showing signs of cognitive impairment and is ready for office. During the debate, Fetterman used closed captioning so he could read questions back before responding, technology he's employed in media interviews conducted since his medical emergency. Fetterman remarked at the debate outset that his stroke was the elephant in the room and that he would likely miss words or mush two words together during the event. In the ensuing hour, his verbal struggles ranged from being noticeable in some answers to obscuring his meaning in others. For an example, according to USA Today, when he was asked about whether he supports expanding the U.S. Supreme Court, Fetterman said he did not, but struggled as he tried to explain why. I do not believe in supporting the Supreme Court, he said. At another point, he was asked to explain his shifting position on fracking. He said, I do support fracking and I don't. I don't support fracking and I stand and I do support fracking. However, the Democrat tried to present his medical difficulties as a point of connection between he and his audience. It knocked me down, but I'm going to keep coming back up, he said of the stroke. And as the campaign, and that's what this campaign is all about to me, it's about fighting for everyone in Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down and needs to get back up. Oz danced around the question of whether he support the or oppose the national 15-week abortion ban introduced by South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, answering only by saying he's pro-life, but believes the procedure should be regulated at the state level. Yesterday, Oz continued to avoid giving a yes or no answer on the bill, even when repeatedly pressed by the moderators. I'll give you a bigger answer, he said. I'm not going to support federal rules that block the ability of states to do what they wish to do. Fetterman, on the other hand, said he would fight to reestablish the standards set forth in Roe v. Wade, which held that women have a constitutional right to an abortion. He also said he'd support setting aside federal dollars to help women in areas where abortion is banned to travel across state lines to access the procedure. And so what we have is we have this debate. And while I believe that perhaps John Fetterman's cognitive ability is not as damaged as his communication ability, I'm not exactly sure that I trust the people saying that John Fetterman is ready to go. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk a little bit about reactions coming up in the second half hour of this hour of the Wells Report. And there are people saying, no, I don't believe that he's ready. Although there are also doctors that say he's fine. He's just absolutely fine. Oz elevated crime as an election issue. In particular, the GOP candidate attacked Fetterman for being soft on crime, citing the Democrats' work as a Pennsylvania lieutenant governor on the state's Board of Pardons and his time as mayor of Braddock, a small borough near Pittsburgh. But Fetterman defended himself against those accusations and asserted that Oz is all talk on the subject of public safety. Quote, I'm the only person on this stage right now that is successful about pushing back against gun violence, he said, pointing out that Braddock went 5 years without a homicide during his time as mayor. Oz responded by noting he won the endorsement of the police union for Allegheny County, which encompasses Braddock. The Republican also pushed Fetterman to apologize for pulling a gun on an unarmed black jogger in 2013 when the Democrat was Braddock's mayor. Fetterman said he was unaware of the man's race at the time and stopped the runner because he thought he'd heard gunshots in the area. And so that's where we stand with regard to the major debates of last night. We have reactions coming up in just a little bit. We do have an opportunity for you to weigh in with your particular commentary on those debates if you saw any of those. You can call me on the telephone, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172, or you can chat with us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. By all means. By the way, if you're watching on Rumble, first of all, thanks. Send me a note. Tell me how I'm doing. The email address is thewellsreport@frontier.com. Please, by all means, put Rumble in the subject line. Thanks very much. You're listening to The Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. If you'd like to talk, that's the line to use, and I'll look forward to hearing from you. We also have a chat room, which is rocking today. Want to thank Gary for showing up. Mike is back. Margie is here. Poker Monkey says, hey, JD, I've been on YouTube watching the 1980 election, the 94 election, the 2016 election. It's amazing, especially the media bias in 1994 against Gingrich and the Republicans taking over. Yeah, this is a long-term problem. The debate, Margie says the debate with Dr. Oz against Fetterman in Pennsylvania was amusing. Oz was definitely the winner. Fetterman looked pathetic and sounded horrible. I don't know whether that was amusing or not. I just thought it was sad. I thought it was sad beyond the pale. Let's see. Would it be something to win in New York? Well, we shall see. Margie then points out something that's really important. I was talking about the debates that happened. Margie is pointing out one that hasn't, at least not so far, and that would be Katie Hobbs over Kari Lake. That's in Arizona. And I got to be perfectly honest with you. Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, doesn't have a chance against Kari Lake. She is well-spoken. She is focused. She knows exactly what she's running on, and she knows the subjects inside, outside, upside down. She understands it completely. Will they debate? I do not know. Let's see. JD, did you notice how the moderators kept calling Dr. Oz Mr. Oz? I frankly did not. I did not notice that. I was so busy with butterflies in my stomach, trying to figure out what Fetterman was going to do. I just felt so bad for him. Poker says, we wish Fetterman all the best in health and staying home where he belongs. Yeah. I don't think when he had that stroke, he should have withdrawn. And I don't know what caused him to not withdraw. And if it was Pennsylvania Democrat election people, then they really have to start looking for a moral compass, I think. Just awful. Fetterman should not be in politics. He is definitely not well. True. Let's see. Let me go down here. Did y'all hear Ted Cruz manhandle The View? It was great. Those washed up hags got nothing. Well, Cruz is used to it. He's used to it. It's nice that Cruz goes on The View, says Poker, to give them the truth, even if they don't want to hear it. He should replace McConnell. Maybe someday. Let's see who else. Nancy says that she is concerned that Fetterman would essentially be just a Trojan horse, that he would just do what he was told to do. That's quite possible. That is quite possible. See, Poker goes on to say, Cruz has a spine of steel. McConnell has a spine of spaghetti. Yeah, overcooked spaghetti. Real bad. Yeah, real bad. Poker points out the first 10 seconds of the debate, Fetterman said good night to the moderator rather than good evening. Well, that's probably some of that communication thing. It's hard for a damaged brain to tell the difference between evening and night. It's fascinating. At least it is for me. I have an in-law who suffered a serious stroke, and she had serious problems communicating. But what I was able to do by paying attention to her, I was able to start interacting with her, and essentially I became her translator. Because if you have some idea of what the injuries are, then you can start to get patterns. And unfortunately, the voters of Pennsylvania don't have time to be able to spend that kind of time that I did with Aunt Hetty that allowed me to communicate with her. It was a sad, sad day. And there are a lot of people talking about it, and those reactions are coming up next on the Wells Report. Our telephone number again, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Margie points out something else. Frankly, if Fetterman loses this race, it's not going to be because of his impairment. It's going to be because of his policies. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. This is the Wells Report, back in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. The chat room is, like I said, humming. I wanted to say this. Mike, a dear friend of this broadcast and a supporter on Patreon, more about that in a moment, did point out that Rumble is showing yesterday's broadcast, but not the current one. True. Because I haven't quite figured out exactly what I need to do to be able to get the show live on Rumble. That's something hopefully that's going to happen here in just a little bit. But I need to tell you that there's kind of a monetary thing that Rumble wants in order to broadcast these things live. And it's expensive, which leads me to something that I feel queasy about saying, but this broadcast could use your financial support. If you believe there's any value in this, you can support it a lot of different ways that don't involve money. One of them is to simply subscribe. The more subscribers, the better. Whatever platform you watch this on, please subscribe to this broadcast. It's news. And it's also translation from propaganda into news. And that's something I'm very proud of, although it's very difficult. It's still something that I think we all need. And that's what I'm trying to provide here. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report, and you can sign up for $1 a month. That's all. That's all that's necessary. There are people that give more, and I can't believe it. I just find it amazing. And I sincerely appreciate everybody who does support us. But normally I do this on a radio station, and I've been broadcasting on Facebook for years. And slowly expanded this when we came back from my deployment on the border. What ended up happening is that the radio station I worked on was sold. They didn't need me, and the network that I was on, the USA Radio Network, a proud achievement of mine, frankly. When I was on the USA Radio Network, I really had a great time with lots of people all over the country talking to me, and by the way, around the world. We had people everywhere. Anyway, that being said, the network merged with another one, Talk Media Network, and they didn't need me either. So this became an independent broadcast that I do out of the Fort Wells Keller Studios. Okay, it's my house. There you go. And so there is no financial support for this broadcast at this time. I'm working on it. Give me a couple of seconds. We'll see what we can do about finding a new home. But that being said, if you can help us out, that would be great. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and pass this along to your friends if you think this show has value. If you don't, tell me you don't think so and tell me why. My email address is thewellsreport@frontier.com. In the subject line, just put the platform on which you're watching. If you're watching on Facebook, put Facebook there. If you're watching on YouTube, put it in the subject line, Twitch, Twitter, etc. I sure would appreciate it. So getting back to the chat before we move on to some of these reactions, there are a lot of people that say that Hobbs and Kari Lake will not get together, and that's too bad. But Katie Hobbs is smart in not doing so. I do believe that Katie Hobbs had just put her away, and so do a lot of people. They agree. Let's see. Gary says he prefers YouTube. And Gary said he's going to Zelle another amount after the first of the year. My friend, I really appreciate that, but you've done enough. You can stand down. I see my wife, every time I say this, she says, "Will you shut up? If these people want to support you financially, let them." Okay. All right. But I'm working on trying to make this a little less expensive for everybody and get back to something I feel more comfortable with, which is essentially getting a salary for the work that I do. I think I'm worthy of it. I'd like to be able to make that happen. We'll try. By the way, if you listen to a talk radio station and you think that this show would fit, by all means, call the management and say, "Hey, have you guys heard of the Wells Report?" And if they haven't, give them my telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Jesse just makes the scene. Hi. Let's get to some reactions. All of them essentially about the Fetterman-Oz debate, but prominent conservative Twitter users ripped into New York Governor Kathy Hochul during her debate with Lee Zeldin, the governor who still to this moment What, we are halfway through the debate. She still hasn't talked about locking up anyone committing any crimes, said Zeldin. Anyone who commits a crime under our laws, especially with the change we made to bail, has consequences. I don't know why that's so important to you. This is what Hochul said. This is what Hochul said. She said, anyone who commits a crime under our laws, especially with the change we made to bail, has consequences. I don't know why that's so important to you. I'm sorry, Governor, have you not seen the videos coming out of New York? Being committed by people that are on cashless bail, on their own recognizance? These are violent people, and they're doing violent things. And people are losing their lives and being irreparably injured. All because of this idea that somehow the criminals are basically victims of societal law instead of the people of society being victims of criminals. And I don't know how this twist happens, but this is not the first time we've seen this. It's just amazing. I don't know why that's important to you, Kathy Hochul said to Lee Zeldin. That ought to cost her job right there. Another point during the debate, both candidates were asked about whether they would mandate a COVID vaccine for children. Zeldin said he would never mandate the vaccine. Hochul said simply, not at this time. Right. So critics got on Twitter, like we talked about. Andrew Giuliani said the fact that crime has risen is based on data, not fear-mongering or demagoguery to the increasing number of victims. Yeah, that's a good one. Rob Astorino said it's obvious to anyone who watched the debate why Kathy Hochul only agreed to do one. She was a disaster. Lee Zeldin was excellent and in command. The choice, November 8th, could not be more clear. And then David Fredoso said, I don't know why crime is so important to you, Governor says to a man who was attacked on stage at his own campaign event, yes, in New York. The perpetrator was released with no bail immediately. There you go. Let's see what else happened. Okay, so let's get to some of these reports. The first one I saw today came from the New York Post. Longtime political observers were shocked by Democrat John Fetterman's display in Tuesday night's debate against Mehmet Oz, in which the Pennsylvania lieutenant governor repeatedly stumbled over his words, lapsed into incoherence on more than one occasion. Fetterman, who suffered a stroke in May, struggled to make himself understood through the showdown after releasing a doctor's note that claimed he was fit to hold office. Despite using a closed captioning system to help him understand what the two debate moderators and Oz were saying, Fetterman repeatedly lapsed into uncomfortable silences and mixed up his words. At one point, the tattooed 53-year-old said, I do not believe in supporting the Supreme Court, in response to a question whether the High Court should have its traditional 9 judges. It was painful. Olivia Nuzzi, who is New York Magazine's Washington correspondent, said, quote, there is no amount of empathy for and understanding about Fetterman's health and recovery that changes the fact that he is absolutely painful to watch. And the other aspects of it are they point out various things that Fetterman said that he contradicted himself on. Conservative attorney and podcast host Jeff Behar noted, that's Behar, perhaps Biehar, noted that Fetterman's answer was going to cost him in West Pennsylvania when he was talking about fracking. He was absolutely against fracking. Then he said he was never against fracking, and that's going to cost him in Western New York, according to Jeff Behar. So let's see. Behar also said, I'm no longer in the snide juvenile position where I can mock people with obvious difficulties as they age or experience catastrophic medical events. I have lived through it, but he shouldn't be running. Aside from that, there is no good answer anyway to his flip-flop. Democrats and journalists tried to pick up the pieces. News Nation host Chris Cuomo said it's not his fault. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman struggled. And let's see, Charlotte Alter of Time Magazine said, I spoke to Fetterman recently and I expected him to be very bad tonight, but it was much worse than I expected and much worse than in our one-on-one conversation. Democrats were saying the same thing post-debate. Why did Fetterman's team allow him to take the stage anyway? No one I'm talking to on the left has a good thing to say about what just took place. That was according to Al Weaver of The Hill. Elections Daily Editor-in-Chief Eric Cunningham said whoever decided to let Fetterman debate should never be involved in Democrat politics again. Yeah. That was the New York Post. A top political debate coach, Brett O'Donnell, talking to Fox News, which is biased, said Pennsylvania Democrat Senator John Fetterman's performance against his GOP challenger has led one of the top political debate coaches to conclude he's not ready to serve. He has the minimal skills necessary to serve. He said he lacked the minimal skills necessary to serve in the U.S. Senate. That is a deliberative body. Debate is all they do. How will John Fetterman be able to either contribute to that debate or even understand it? This is the first and only debate between Fetterman and Pennsylvania Republican Mehmet Oz. The candidates sparred over the issues: crime, economy, abortion, and fracking. Brett O'Donnell, the president of O'Donnell and Associates, who served as a leading political debate coach for numerous candidates, told Fox News in a statement, the conversation between the two candidates was not a demonstration of a healthy debate, and went on to say this, quote, Fetterman is unfit to serve because he can't defend his policy positions. He can't articulate them, and would be a poor representative of Pennsylvania given his condition. Pennsylvanians should ask if this is the kind of representative they want in the U.S. Senate. They also should ask what is best for John Fetterman. Shouldn't he be allowed to recover without the pressures of being a U.S. Senator? It's clear he is not ready to serve. And then there's this. Dasha Burns works for NBC. She interviewed John Fetterman before this debate, and she was vilified for saying that during the interview, when Mr. Fetterman could read the questions, etc., it was reasonably okay, although there were signs of impairment there. But in the talk between the interview and the small talk, he was not able to communicate. She reported that. After the Democrat delivered a widely panned debate performance last night against Mehmet Oz, where he consistently struggled to answer questions clearly or deliver clean responses, Burns' observation was revisited. Shame on every reporter who attacked Dasha Burns over her Fetterman reporting and tried to cover up what we were all witnessing now with our own eyes. Washington Free Beacon reporter Alana Goodman. Meghan McCain said Dasha Burns deserves an apology from the American Press Corps for her treatment covering Fetterman. Remember all those reporters who attacked NBC's Dasha Burns for her remarks about the Fetterman interview? Yikes, Federalist-in-Chief Molly Hemingway. The losers who went after Dasha Burns for frankly underselling the issue should be ashamed of themselves, according to Fourth Watch editor Steve Krakauer. Burns was vilified by media peers for noting that Fetterman had problems communicating with her while she was attempting to make small talk before a rare interview granted by the Democrat Senate candidate. She said Fetterman had a problem understanding their discussion before the interview, which relied on closed captioning. Fetterman has not released his medical records, leading some experts to speculate he's suffering from an auditory processing disorder called aphasia. And that is as cruel as it gets. Not only can you not speak, but you can't understand. I doubt that it's aphasia. In point of fact, this is just my completely uneducated, from a medical standpoint, opinion. I'm pretty sure that John Fetterman is having trouble actually processing his thoughts into English, into language, and trouble processing spoken language to him. I'm pretty sure that he understands what he reads, but I'm also pretty sure he does not understand what is being spoken to him. The injury to his brain has taken his processing capability from spoken word and damaged it severely. But he can still read and understand what he reads. Then he has trouble speaking about it. And these are problems in the world's greatest deliberative body, the United States Senate. It is truly sad that he is still and was still on stage. And yes, Dasha Burns is someone who is owed more than just an apology. Let's see. Fetterman's wife called for a network apology and consequences for Burns to hear her own NBC colleagues publicly questioning her observations. Liberal journalists were angry and sympathetic on behalf of Fetterman. But once again, she absolutely saw it. She absolutely saw it. Glenn Greenwald wrote, anyone who watched any part of the debate between Fetterman and Oz knows exactly what happened, whether they're willing to admit it or not. And people should read this thread and remember what was done to Dasha Burns to immediately see why people hate and distrust the media. It's all right there. It's all right there. John Fetterman is probably a good guy, although I disagree vehemently with his politics. But he does not belong running for the United States Senate at this time. Like I said, next time around, 6 years from now, maybe. But right now, no way. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. Yesterday, we reported an amazing story. The New York Supreme Court setting aside the firings of police officers, firemen, and others from state positions for refusing to take a COVID-19 vaccine. The Supreme Court was unequivocal in its statement that the vaccine does not prevent you from getting COVID, nor does it prevent you from transmitting COVID, and immediately ordered all those people to be reinstated with back pay. Today, New York City has appealed a decision that ruled the city's vaccine mandate unconstitutional, ordered all city employees fired for their vaccination status be reinstated with back pay. The ruling came from the Supreme Court Justice Ralph Porzio, and it argued that there was no evidence the COVID-19 vaccine blocks the contraction or transmission of the virus. New York City fired roughly 1,700 employees in February for refusing to get vaccinated. City officials argued the vaccine mandate was, quote, firmly grounded in law and is critical to New Yorkers' public health, unquote. This according to a spokesman from the New York City Law Department telling the Washington Post. Former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio first instituted the mandate for city workers before leaving office in 2021. Workers were required to show proof of at least one vaccine dose by November 1st of that year. De Blasio also imposed a mandate on public-facing private companies. The city allowed exceptions for professional athletes and performers, however. Of course, people, well, they probably remember that Novak Djokovic, the world's greatest tennis player at this time, was not allowed into New York for the U.S. Open. Yeah. The city allowed those exceptions for professional athletes and performers, and there was, of course, outrage from members of the police and fire departments. There was a very poignant interview earlier today from a New York fireman or policeman. I don't know which. I sort of joined it in progress. But he sat there and said, you know, I haven't been able to pay my bills. My mortgage is behind, and so on and so on. This was disastrous for me. Well, it was. And there was no reason for them to do it, as it turns out. The only possible excuse is that at one time or another, there were people making decisions on the fly. And those decisions were based on the fact that we had never seen anything like this before. But that was overturned pretty quickly when things stopped adding up. And yet the political imperative remained in place. I mean, I got 3 shots. I got the 2 series from Moderna, and I got a booster, and I got COVID. I mean, how did I get COVID in the first place if I had the shots? How many people did I give COVID to? I don't know. I gave them all my contacts, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't tough. I was on deployment when it happened. I knew exactly who I'd been in contact with. But the problem with all of this is that this political mandate became an opportunity to set aside the Constitution of the United States, which is another reason why the federal government, or any government, state, county, local, should have nothing to do with healthcare. This is the exact reason why healthcare is no one's business, especially the governments that we deal with on a daily basis. However, New York City says we're going to go ahead and appeal that ruling. Yeah. Eric Adams announced plans to cut the vaccine mandate for private companies. His administration has no intention of relaxing the existing mandate for city workers. Now, there will be a review in a New York appellate court. That's the next thing. Will it get into federal court? I don't think so. And I don't think that the appellate court is going to say that the judge was wrong, Judge Porzio. I don't believe they're going to say he's wrong. This is one of the first people in the United States to actually point out the reality of it and force politicians to deal with that reality, which I believe is something that needs to happen more, not less. New York City appeals the decision. Why would they do that? Actually, I think I know why. They would appeal that decision because maybe some of that money got spent. Maybe it was a budgetary windfall that immediately got spent on other projects. Other projects beside police officers and firefighters? Well, it's one of the reasons why I don't live in New York and why I never will live in New York. And until they get their crime situation under control, I'm not even going to go to New York. I'm not. I simply won't. And I don't suggest anybody else does either. I mean, how are you going to get around? I have driven a rental car in New York City. It was remarkably and crazily dangerous. I mean, there is not a car in New York City that isn't dented in some way, shape, or form. I mean, just look at the pictures. They're not hard to find. This is the Wells Report. This is for Wednesday, October 26th, the year of our Lord, 2022. We are 13 days away from a very important election. I heard it from some friends of mine yesterday who said, you know, that solution that you had with all of this mess that's going on, all the hysteria that's being flung at us from every media outlet in the world, you know, it's probably going to hurt you if you have people vote early and then turn off their televisions. Well, that's true. And it's probably not the smartest thing I ever said from a standpoint of audience building, but I'd rather tell the truth. I'd rather be straightforward. Yeah, that's just the way that works. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us on this first hour. Lots to discuss in the second hour of this broadcast, which is right around the corner. The Wells Report. Back in a second. Alrighty then. So once again, like I said, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you in a few minutes. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? What we do is we report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. What we also do is we make commentary. That's just my opinion. And we debate both my opinion, your opinion, the news, the facts, the bias, all of it. And we find ourselves in a position where not only is bias apparent in our news, or what's called news, there's bias in just about every other part of American society right now. And that bias is presenting itself in violations of the Constitution. We do all of that, and we are serious about it, and we thank you for joining us here on the Wells Report. There's some things you need to know about the opinion part of this broadcast. There are a lot of people that do this job that believe that their opinion should be news. It is not. I don't believe in it. I never have. I guess I'm old school in that. I don't believe that a newscaster's opinion matters to you in any way, shape, or form. However, in a case like this, we find ourselves in a position where this news, or what is supposed news, needs to be debated. It needs to be commented on. I fight with it. So what I try to do is I try to make sure you understand the difference between news, the analysis for fact and bias, and my opinion. And I do so using this medium. I have a couple of different cameras here. I'll have 3 soon. I've got it sitting over there in a box, as a matter of fact, right over there. But what I want you to understand is, when I report the news, I generally use this camera. This is the one where I'm reporting the news. And when I'm making an opinion, I also, by the way, will use this camera for the analysis part of fact and bias. But when I'm making an opinion, most of the time I switch to this camera because I want you to understand it's coming from a different perspective. The news that I use is, like I said, biased, and it's terrible, especially now. I brought this up yesterday. The American people collectively lose their minds in just about every single campaign cycle, especially toward the end. But what I've also noticed is the shrill and hysteria of biased media attempting to interfere with your decision-making process in the ballot in the voting booth. That's inexcusable. And we tried to impeach and remove from office a president for some sort of concocted bias or some kind of interference in American elections from Russia. Because the story is that the Russians were interfering with this election. Well, who do we impeach when the news media, which is clearly biased, does the exact same thing? When I was talking about the hypocrisy, when I'm talking about this unbelievable double standard, this is the reason I do this broadcast. And these are the things we must consider, and we must debate, and there must be commentary. Because we have to figure this out, and we have to stop it. This is not a nation of politics. This is a nation of laws. A nation of laws. And these laws are being selectively enforced by what is nothing short of a corrupt federal law enforcement effort involving both the FBI, the DOJ, and unfortunately, it goes even deeper than that. When the Patriot Act was signed into law, that was by George W. Bush, by the way. When the Patriot Act was signed into law, what ended up happening is the powers that be decided to break down the barriers that had long existed between America's intelligence services and America's federal law enforcement services. I suppose at some level it made some sort of sense with the people that were putting all this together because of the nature of the 9/11 2001 attacks. There was information in possession of CIA that did not make it to the FBI. And the FBI and those intelligence services had to explain why it was that 19 hijackers could fly airliners into buildings in the United States. And so they said, we simply have to have this breakdown. We have to break down this wall between these services. That has been disastrous. The Patriot Act itself is a disaster. I said at the time I had real problems with this law. Because it wasn't so much the people that actually came up with it, it was those that would come later. The Obama administration then co-opted most of the executive branch agencies into political action committees. And that's where we find ourselves today. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Associate Justice Samuel Alito said that the unprecedented leak of the Supreme Court's draft opinion overturning Roe v. Wade earlier this year made conservative justices on the nation's highest courts, quote, targets for assassination, unquote. In fact, there was an attempt to do just that. Justice Alito continued, quote, the leak also made those of us who were thought to be in the majority and in support of overruling Roe and Casey targets for assassination because it gave people a rational reason to think they could prevent that from happening by killing one of us, unquote. It's horrible. Alito referenced a man who made threats against Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh and was arrested outside his home in June after the draft opinion leaked. Nicholas John Roski was charged with attempted murder and pled not guilty. He should have been charged with attempted assassination of a federal justice. In May, Politico published a draft Supreme Court opinion suggesting the court would overturn its landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that in some people's minds established a constitutional right to abortion. 1 month later, a majority of the court handed down a decision that was substantially similar to the leaked draft. And what happened? People of the left immediately started gathering around the homes of the conservative side of the Supreme Court. Their addresses supplied by a leftist organization that doxed those personal addresses. The neighborhoods of those justices became political battlegrounds. And in the case of Brett Kavanaugh, almost became a political killing ground. What happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. The Department of Justice had laws on the books that were all they needed to remove those people forthwith and stop them from ever assembling again. And they did nothing about it. They did nothing. Attorney General Merrick Garland, who had been nominated to be on that very court, remained silent while these people threatened the lives of these justices. Meanwhile, people who did far worse things in support of leftist causes have been virtually left alone. And there is the duopoly of the American justice system now. And this hypocrisy, this double standard, is perhaps the most dangerous thing I've seen this government do. Federal law enforcement, the executive branch, in fact, is responsible for enforcing law. Not enforcing the laws they agree with, not enforcing the laws to a political end, but enforcing the laws to a stronger, healthier, less crime-ridden society. When we decided that we would walk away from all of that, well, chaos has ensued. There are 6 attacks on the New York subway system every day. And some of them are deadly. People have lost their lives. There have been cases of rampant crime in the streets where people in search of what they said was social justice were able to essentially run rampant in the United States, looting, burning, injuring, killing. What happened with those people? The answer is not much. In the meantime, the American people, seeing that apparently that was okay, except from the other side of the political spectrum, gathered in Washington, D.C. And a much less destructive, much less dangerous riot then ensued. Those people not only were arrested and charged and prosecuted, some were even kept in solitary confinement without charges for months and months and months. Groups like Jane's Revenge would go and firebomb pregnancy centers because they offered a solution that did not involve abortion. Has anyone from Jane's Revenge been arrested? The reason I ask is because there sure have been a lot of Proud Boys that have been thrown in jail. Why is that? Why are the Proud Boys far more dangerous than Jane's Revenge or Ruth Sent Us? Those are terroristic threats. Terroristic threats are against the law. Why aren't those laws being enforced? At least on people that have leftist intention. This is a grave, and I mean this is a grave incursion against the United States of America by a portion of the government of the United States of America. It cannot stand. It will not stand. And yet, as we come to this conversation today, it does. It absolutely does. I'm going to talk more about it here coming up in just a little bit. We have to get past this. We have to demand that federal law enforcement enforce the laws fairly, equally. Equal representation, equal justice under the law. And that is not what we have. The examples probably are resonating in your mind right now. And I don't care whether you're on the left or right. A chaotic society hurts everyone. Everyone. And it must stop. There's more on this. It's coming up in just a couple of moments. What are your comments? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can reach out on the chat room. Flying this afternoon. By all means, put your 2 cents in. I'll be reading some of them when I return here in just a couple of moments. Our nation is under attack from within. And law enforcement is doing very little, at least on one side of the political spectrum. More coming up next. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Yvonne says they're enforcing laws that are being manipulated to be used to arrest peaceful protesters, or perhaps I should say, some of the people's words and actions have been twisted to fit a law. The thing about it is those laws, yes, indeed, are being twisted to fit a political imperative, which is to suppress political dissent. And you don't have to go to a major city. All you have to do is go to the closest school board to see that people are being arrested for arguing with the school board over things that seem, at least on their face, to be pretty straightforward. No, you are not going to put pornographic material in front of our children, which is what's happening. I've brought that up several times on this broadcast where I say, it's not sex education any longer. When I was in school and I had sex education, it was actually reproductive education. This is how it works. This is how babies are made, et cetera, et cetera. What it has morphed into over time is having sex education. Here's how you have sex. This is the kind of sex you can have. You don't have to be a boy or a girl, and you don't have to be, you're not stuck with particular mixing of genders, not even the genders inside your own head, for example. And people who objected were intimidated by the DOJ and the FBI. This is a serious problem that we must fix. We must. More about that in just a couple of moments. There is, however, a story of law enforcement. Darrell Brooks Jr. has been found guilty on dozens of criminal charges today. A jury found him responsible for driving through a 2021 Christmas parade, leaving 6 people dead and dozens injured. The jury deliberated for 2 hours yesterday before coming back this morning. In total, it took the panel little more than 3 hours to find Brooks guilty of 76 charges brought against him, including six accounts of first-degree intentional homicide, each of which carries a mandatory life prison term. Brooks looked down, hit his face between his hands, rested on his forehead as the verdict was being read. 6 people died, another 61 injured, when a red Ford Blazer, driven by Mr. Brooks, tore through a holiday parade on November 21st, 2021. Authorities and others scrambled to help victims over a 4-block stretch. I just looked up how long a city block is. It's about 1/10 of a mile. It was a half a mile of carnage perpetrated on society by this man. He was malfunctioning at a level bordering on madness. He represented himself. His trial represented the end of a long legal process, which included dramatic shifts, beginning with charges filed 2 days after the parade, continuing with pre-trial hearings days before the trial. Some charges were among the charges were 2 changes in Brooks' plea of guilty to not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, also known as insanity, and then a withdrawal of that defense strategy. This man fired his attorneys, and the judge fired back. It was a mess, and it was televised. And Darrell Brooks is now guilty of killing 6 and injuring 70 others at a Christmas parade. Coming up next, what about these guys who, say, for example, want to take law into their own hands after it being, shall we say, set aside by the people responsible for it? There's a story on that in today's news as well. We'll get to that next. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're discussing the dichotomy of selective law enforcement by the DOJ and the FBI. Our federal law enforcement agencies are playing politics. And it must stop. They don't seem to be willing to stop it on their own. So we, the voters of these United States, must do it for them. How do we do that? By removing the people responsible for crime rampant in our streets. That's how we do it. And we had better do it this time. Because it's getting worse. And that is because of the summer of 2020, when people were allowed to run in the streets, loot, burn, pillage, injure, murder, all in the name of social justice. What's interesting is that once again, that law enforcement effort against those people is selective. While those on the other side of the political spectrum, well, they face almost instant censure. The Arizona chapter of the League of Women Voters has filed a lawsuit in federal court targeting groups and individuals they say are conspiring to intimidate voters in Arizona through a coordinated effort known as Operation Dropbox. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of the League in the U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona by a group known as Protect Democracy. It is the second recent lawsuit filed in federal court targeting the conduct of individuals, some of whom are armed, who have been staking out and filming voters at ballot drop boxes in Arizona. I doubt very sincerely that they're filming them. Okay, I got to go over here. Can I make a suggestion? We haven't shot film in about at least 20 years. Okay? We had videotape, and we don't roll videotape anymore. It's just video. These people are videoing people at the ballot boxes. They're not filming them. Okay? Can we get that right? I mean, it's just, I know it's a distraction, and I'm disseminating I can't come up with the word. Anyway, I am digressing. That being said, all I can say is now, can we please just say they were videoed instead of being filmed? Just pay attention to the news. Well, we're filming this for whatever reason. You're not filming anything. They hardly make film anymore in the first place. Just a thing. Back to work. Anyway, and some of these people are armed, and they've been staking out and videoing voters at the ballot drop boxes in Arizona. The lawsuit alleges the conduct violates the Voting Rights Act and other federal law that prohibits conspiracies to intimidate voters. It is seeking a court order blocking the defendants from further intimidating others or voters or otherwise violating the law. In the lawsuit, the league argues the conduct of people who have been monitoring drop boxes in Yavapai and Maricopa counties is part of an escalating scheme of voter intimidation and harassment in Arizona that undermines the rights of voters to cast their ballots free from intimidation, threats, or coercion. The voting rights organization alleges the Lions of Liberty, LLC, and the Yavapai County Preparedness Team, two groups that the league claims are related to the Oath Keepers of Yavapai County, along with a group known as Clean Elections USA, have been, quote, actively planning, coordinating, and recruiting for widespread campaigns to surveil and intimidate Arizona voters at a ballot drop box or at ballot drop boxes, and baselessly accuse them either directly or indirectly of committing voter fraud and spreading false information about legally valid forms of voting. An official with the Yavapai County Preparedness Team declined to comment on the lawsuit when reached by CNN. An attorney for Clean Elections USA did not immediately respond to CNN's inquiry. CNN has also reached out to the Lions of Liberty via the group's website. They are calling them vigilantes. Okay. Let's go back to 2008. The new Black Panther Party stood in front of a polling place in Philadelphia, at least one, and they were armed with billy clubs and made amazing statements. amazing statements like, okay, calling people white devils, and you're about to be ruled by the black man, cracker. The incident drew attention to police, who at about 10 a.m. sent King Samir Shabazz away in part because of his billy club. Jackson was allowed to stay because he was a certified poll watcher. Stephen Robert Morse, a journalist and filmmaker, upon arriving at the scene, pulled out a flip video camera and quickly started videoing the event. The incident gained national attention after being uploaded to YouTube, quickly went viral. No complaints were filed by voters about the incident, though poll watchers witnessed some voters approaching the polls and then turning away in response to the Black Panther Party. The legal proceedings, the Department of Justice started an inquiry in January of 2009, less than 2 weeks before the Bush administration left office. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice filed a civil lawsuit under the Voting Rights Act against 4 defendants, including Shabazz. A former civil rights lawyer named Barty Bull was serving as a poll watcher at the polling station where the incident occurred, submitted an affidavit to the Department of Justice request supporting the lawsuit, stating that he considered it to have been the most severe instance of voter intimidation he had ever witnessed. What happened? The charges were dismissed, except against Shabazz, and then Shabazz was given an injunction that forced him to stay 100 feet away from a polling place when he was in possession of a weapon. In response to that controversy, the new Black Panther Party suspended its Philadelphia chapter, repudiated Minister King Shabazz in posting on its website. The party stated that Shabazz made an honest error by bringing a billy club to the polling station, and because of his doing so, he had been suspended from the Black Panther Party until January of 2010. So we have guys in Arizona, some of them armed, overwatching ballot boxes. I have thoughts. I have been telling people who have been concerned about elections in this nation and concerned about the political bent of this nation and concerned about the political law enforcement of the DOJ and the FBI and have been concerned about the political travelings of the American government to, by all means, redress their grievances, but do so peacefully. While I can understand people who are doing something that is controversial, especially controversial to the left, might want to go ahead and arm themselves, I am reminded of the civil rights marches that I saw when I was a kid in the 60s. The people of those protests were not armed, and they paid the price. They were beaten. They were arrested. They were jailed. All of that happened over and over and over again. But what they showed us was what we need to remember. If you are someone worried about the political stylings of the American government, the very odd and hypocritical enforcement of law in this nation, and you feel like you have to do something about it, do so unarmed. I doubt very sincerely this lawsuit would have been filed if people were simply armed with an American flag and a copy of the Constitution, which I continue to urge. I continue to urge those things to be the tools of that protest and nothing more. I have a concealed weapons permit. I train at least once a month. Getting better, becoming more aware of the incredible responsibility that requires. But when I go to some political gathering, I am unarmed. Is it dangerous? Not so far, but it's in my mind. Is that voter intimidation? Probably. We have to make sure that if we are going to be successful, we had better not give somebody an opportunity like the League of Women Voters to file a lawsuit because somebody's carrying a pistol or a rifle or what have you. Don't carry them. An American flag and a copy of the Constitution. Go to the Cato Institute. They have this wonderful copy of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. It's a great book. Carry that with you, but nothing more. Because what ends up happening is this very same unequal law enforcement will take any excuse necessary to be able to suppress your point of view and the actions you take in support of it, the support of those points. Every single time. And that's just where we are. We don't fight this one on the streets. We don't take to the streets and burn things down. We don't shine lasers into policemen's eyes. We don't kick people to death in the streets. We don't search for social justice by stealing washing machines out of Target. We just arrive. And yeah, we watch. And no, we cannot expect any help from law enforcement, especially in major cities in the United States where law enforcement is the enemy of not the people of those cities, the politicians of those cities. Somehow thinking that the real victims of American society are those breaking the law, as opposed to those that are theoretically protected by it. In fact, in New York City, there was a group called the Guardian Angels. The Guardian Angels, a nonprofit, international volunteer organization. They had a goal of unarmed crime prevention. It was founded on February 13th, 1979 in New York City by Curtis Sliwa. It spread to 130 cities and 30 countries nationwide or worldwide. The Guardian Angels. They were unarmed as well. They had to be. They were successful. I don't know whether there were any lawsuits that were applied to the Guardian Angels. I don't know whether they're still in business to this day. All I can say is there aren't enough Guardian Angels in New York City to stop what's happening in that city because of all of this political malevolence, or more appropriately, political malign behavior against law enforcement in that city and others. So these so-called vigilantes, the mistake they make is showing up armed. Stop it. Let truth be your weapon. Let being right when it comes to being American be your defense. To do otherwise plays into the hands of those who you know are doing their dead level best to subvert what is a societal act of choosing our leadership for the sake of their politics. There's an old saying. When somebody's malfunctioning, say for example your political opposition, don't interrupt them. Also, if you are the political opposition, don't be interruptible. Don't do something, especially something that is plainly provocative, in an effort to stand for your beliefs. I'm old enough to have learned it from the experts who had legitimate beefs. Victims, and yes, they were victims of rampant racism, which is a crime against humanity. What we see now are crimes against the Constitution. What we see are crimes against all the things that make America what it is. But those of us who protest must do so with reason and must point out the documents that give lie to this inappropriate hypocrisy. And that's the Constitution. We must do this. It's not something we should do. It's something we must do. Or we're going to lose. You cannot justify totalitarian government. You can't. And when you try to do something, say, for example, that totalitarian government does to you, you're losing. Mahatma Gandhi is also famous for this. And he changed the world. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, analysis, commentary, and debate. We'd also like your support. Please share this show with your friends. If you find it valuable, please share it. Also support it. You can do that a couple of different ways. One, you can subscribe to whatever platform you're on. Subscribe to the Wells Report on that platform. Give us the thumbs up. If there's a like button or something along that line, use it. The more we get of those, the better it gets. As a matter of fact, I was looking over some of the analytics of this broadcast. And so far, there's actually 100% thumbs up. And I think it's because we don't talk about things in partisan ways. Unless, of course, we're talking about America. Not Republica or not Democratia, but America. This show has a bias toward the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. We look at things through an American perspective. If, for whatever reason, your politics dictate that somehow is some kind of right-wing screed, perhaps you should read the Constitution again. I do it all the time. I keep it with me most times. That same Cato Institute book that I was telling you about, same color as this shirt. I keep it with me. I keep considering it. I've gone to the National Archives. The Constitution is 4 pages. A lot of it was about the first apportionment of voters and congressional districts. It is a brilliant document that gave rise to the greatest nation in the history of the human endeavor. We must be better stewards of it. So yeah, that's the bias. And yes, I do run news through that lens. And like I said, if you think that's partisan, maybe you should consider your politics. I would if I were you. Because we can, in this divided nation, rally around the Constitution that created it, can't we? And if you can't rally around the Constitution, why? That's a good question, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, support the show if you can. If you want to throw us some money, that would be good too. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon, Patreon, /The Wells Report. $1 a month will do. That's all you need. Bigger gifts are always welcome, but you know what? I feel comfortable with $1, maybe $2, maybe even $5. But much beyond that, I'm thinking that if this show deserves success, and that's only because you think it does, that'll be plenty. I guess we'll find out together, won't we? While we're talking about unequal enforcement of the law, you really can't have that conversation without talking about the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case. The 3 defendants accused of helping to plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer were convicted on all charges this morning and taken into custody. That ended a long state trial, part of a broader case in federal court that had mixed results. Joe Morrison, his father-in-law, Pete Musico, who were not present in the courtroom, and Paul Beller, who was. He seemed stunned as the verdict was read. They were found guilty of providing support for a terrorist act, a 20-year felony, as members of the Wolverine Watchmen, which the jury also concluded was an illegal gang, as if there was a legal one. They were also found guilty of using weapons during these crimes, which is also a felony. The convictions today come 2 months after 2 other men were convicted of conspiring to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The attorneys for Morrison, Musico, and Beller had argued that they were guilty of only tough talk, which is constitutionally protected. Morrison, Musico, and Beller held gun drills in rural Jackson County with the leader of the scheme, Adam Fox, who said he was disgusted with Whitmer and other officials and he wanted to kidnap her. The FBI had infiltrated the group, and some of the FBI informants had taken the idea of actually conversing about the details into account, which led to the acquittal of about 8 of these people. Jurors read and heard violent anti-government screeds as well as support for the Boogaloo, which, by the way, is a civil war that could have been triggered by the shocking abduction of a sitting governor. Morrison, who recently tested positive for COVID-19, Musico watched the verdict by video away from the courtroom. Judge Thomas Wilson ordered all 3 to jail while they await sentencing scheduled for December 15th. Like I said, if you have a problem with the government, you had better have a peaceful solution. You better not do crazy and silly, stupid things. You better stop. Now, these guys were accused of actually having gun drills in a shoot house. I'm here to tell you that I have taken part in gun drills in a shoot house. And you know why? Because it's responsible. It's responsible for a guy that has a concealed weapons permit to actually know what he's doing. And so, yeah, I practice a lot. But you know what I'm not? I'm not some beer-powered moron who's looking to spend time in federal jail. No, I will walk the walk. I will walk the talk that I bring you. I will show up with an American flag and a copy of the Constitution. And that's all. Because that's how you win. That's how you win. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in the next hour. Thanks for joining us today. And there you go. Well, that was a good hour, I think. It's one of those things. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We report the news honestly, truthfully. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That's just my opinion. And we debate the news, the analysis, the commentary, all of it. That's what we do. To make that debate happen, there are a couple of ways you can do it. You can call me at 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You can also join the chat room. Lots of folks on the chat room today. Honest, good conversations going on today, and we sincerely appreciate it. We do. There are breaking news stories, and we're going to get to some of them here in just a couple of minutes. Let me see what I can do about bringing up the notification part of my phone. The notifications. Come on, notifications. Hang on just a minute while I work my way through this technology, which I am capable of doing, by the way. You're supposed to be able to sweep upward. No, that didn't work. You're supposed to be able to sweep upward through half of and get the notifications, and it's not working. And I don't know why. Let's try this. No, that's how I turn on the flashlight. Let's try this. No, that doesn't work. You're supposed to go, isn't it right on a iPhone 13? You're supposed to be able to sweep upward. Ha 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 ha. No, that didn't work either. Let me try that again. I got a bunch of things that, okay, hang on a second. Doggone it. There's some breaking news. I have to get to it. I'm annoyed. Hold on just a moment. Let me do something real fast here because there are a couple of them that are, here we go. All right, this is one of them. This is an exclusive from Fox News. Republican senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson have shared with the U.S. attorney leading the criminal investigation into Hunter Biden more than 200 pages of bank records related to his and the Biden family's alleged, quote, connections with the Chinese regime and persons connected to its military and intelligence elements, unquote. Fox News independently reviewed the bank records Grassley and Johnson obtained through the course of their investigation into Hunter Biden's business dealings. More than 200 pages of records come from Cathay Bank. That's the oldest operating bank in the United States, founded by Chinese Americans. Grassley and Johnson obtained the records from a U.S. bank in their course of their investigation into the business dealings. The records reveal transactions between Hunter Biden-linked business entities and the Chinese energy firm CEFC, which reportedly had ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Some of those transactions were previously revealed in Grassley and Johnson's 2020 reports, which they say show the Biden family's, quote, extensive links to foreign governments and questionable foreign nationals, posed counterintelligence and extortion concerns. Grassley and Johnson have been sounding the alarm on these business transactions with Chinese-linked associates, CEFC chairman Ling Jiaming and Gongwen Dong, which resulted in millions of dollars in questionable transactions. In a letter that Grassley and Johnson wrote to the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss, exclusively obtained by Fox News, the GOP senators notified him of the hundreds of pages of records, slammed him and the Justice Department from ignoring their attempts to ensure that the criminal probe into Hunter Biden is thorough and free from political interference. Weiss is leading the probe into Hunter Biden. There was also some news regarding Facebook. Meta rather. Hang on, META. Let me see what the meta was as I'm trying to remember these. Oh boy, here we go. This from CNBC, which is essentially the only functioning part of NBC News's journalistic efforts. Let's see. Here we go. Meta shares continued their 2022 free fall. They plunged 14% in extending trading today after Facebook's parent issued a weak forecast for the fourth quarter that came up well short of Wall Street's expectations for their earnings. Meta is contending with a broad slowdown in online ad spending, challenges from Apple's iOS privacy update, and increased competition from TikTok. Added up, Meta has posted consecutive quarters of revenue declines and is expected to post its third straight drop in the fourth quarter. The company said revenue for the last 3 months of the year will be $30 billion to $32 billion. Analysts were expecting sales of $32.2 billion. While revenue fell 4% in the third quarter, Meta's costs and expenses rose 19% year over year. Operating income declined. That's when you try to say income and declined at the same time. The operating income declined 46% from the previous year to $5.66 billion. Meta's operating margin, or profits left after accounting for costs to run the business, sank 20% from 36% a year earlier. Overall net income down 52% in the third quarter. That's kind of important. Let me see if I can get this other breaking news that just happened here. Come on. Where's my notifications? Okay, during the break, I will find out how to get the notifications and get you the rest of the news. So please stay with me on this. All right? There you go. So that was something that we were that I wanted to do. It all came up on my on my phone. And so my phone is arguing with me right now, and hopefully it will stop, and I will have that information for you coming up in just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that are going on. In this nation right now, there is someone who used to be a president who is under near constant criticism, investigation, persecution, who pointed out that the 2020 election was stolen from him. He honestly believes it, in my view. I could be wrong, but I do believe he honestly believes that. And there are a lot of people that also honestly believe that. Many of them are on ballots across the nation. What's going to happen if those people are elected? What does that say about the 2020 election? If the 2020 election was so good, how come so many states made changes to their election laws? Those are all the hanging participles there. But the point of that whole statement was Donald Trump is vilified for his beliefs about the 2020 election. Yesterday, we reported that Hillary Clinton is talking about how the right, and she says, of course, the extremist right, because that is the term of art these days, the extremist right is planning to steal the 2024 election. The backlash from that came today. Hillary Clinton is peddling a disinformation campaign about a pending Supreme Court election law case by claiming Republicans are scheming to literally steal, that was her quote, the 2024 presidential election. This according to legal experts. The failed 2016 presidential candidate claimed yesterday right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election, and they're not making a secret of it. She charged the right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections. Legal experts say Clinton appears to be referencing and amplifying misinformation about an upcoming Supreme Court case, which is Moore v. Harper, over whether a state court appropriately rejected the legislature's congressional redistricting plan. Quote, Hillary is pushing the left's disinformation campaign when she says the court may rule in Moore v. Harper to give state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections. This came from Carrie Severino, the president of JCN. She told Fox News Digital, the process for selecting presidential electors is not even before the court in this case. But even assuming a state legislature were to try something that politically suicidal, it lacks the power to override Congress's determination of election day to ignore its own election rules, both of which it would be doing in such a scenario, said Severino. The case is set for oral argument December 7th. It stems from a lawsuit by a GOP-controlled North Carolina General Assembly over their state court's validation of congressional redistricting maps from the 2020 census. North Carolina lawmakers will argue that the U.S. Constitution gives sole authority to regulate federal elections to state legislatures, and say the state court could not point to any example of how the new maps violated state law. Instead, lawmakers argue the court engaged in unfettered policymaking by rejecting the maps based on a broad state commitment to hold free and fair elections. According to this article, Clinton made a leap from there to suggest if the Supreme Court rules in favor of North Carolina, the 2024 presidential election could somehow be decided by Republican-controlled state legislatures. I brought this up yesterday. I said, excuse me, but if you have a problem with Republican-controlled state legislatures, perhaps you should win more elections. Of course, you're not going to win more elections by determining that the only way to save the entire planet from a cataclysm caused by the climate is to give politicians trillions upon trillions of dollars. If you keep talking about that, you're going to keep losing elections. It's simple as that. There's also another little problem with this thing that they are working on as their main talking point in the 2022 election, which is the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court. They keep misrepresenting what that was. It was a return to the states. A return to the states of the idea that someone could terminate a pregnancy based on their own decision making. That is not overturning anything. That is returning to the United States of America the constitutional rights it has to be able to make determinations based on the people in that state and their votes. But that's not what's reported. They say the court overturned a constitutional right to have an abortion. There is no court, there is no way to make a constitutional amendment in a courtroom. You have to do it in legislatures, not just in Washington, D.C., but everywhere in the country. And so when we have all of this misinformation going on, and we have a leftist press that's willing to perpetrate it and even perpetuate it, then somebody like, I don't know, me, I suppose, will have to stand up and point out that, sorry, that is all propaganda. It's strange. Yvonne points out that the left can claim elections are stolen, but when conservatives say the same thing, we're lying. Well, yeah, that's true. This is the panic before what could be a red storm in these United States. That's what this is. And once again, all of this does nothing more than shed light on the corruption that is currently in place in the United States by a leftist political machine involving not just the Democrat Party, the progressives, but also the news media, and their willingness to play politics instead of doing their jobs. The idea that the government should be all powerful on all of us, as opposed to be a servant of us. That's the problem. And so that is something that came out today. There's also something else that happened regarding another woman of note in politics. And I will share that with you coming up in just a couple of moments. Yeah, this unfortunately takes us back to the Windy City. I'm sorry. The Windy City. Yeah, maybe that is Chicago. Is Chicago the Windy City? I think it is. City of big shoulders. Anyway, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is the person. What has she done now? I don't think you're going to believe it, especially when you consider that if you do a Google search and you Google Chicago weekend shootings, you get the latest weekend shootings. I might even do it coming up with this. But first, I'm going to find out how to get the notifications on my iPhone 13. And I'm going to go back to some of that breaking news, and I will report that coming up in just a couple of moments. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. Did I mention this show's live? This show is live, okay? So when something happens, it happens. Back with more in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us today. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172, and I have overcome technology yet again. In case you don't know, if you have an iPhone 13 Pro like I do, in order to get to the notification center, you go to the home screen and you swipe down from the top, and it pops right up. The other good news is I gave you the two stories. I remember two stories, and the third one, now, I'm going to report to you here in just a couple of seconds, so I can give myself a little bit of time to talk to you a little bit about Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot proposed an ordinance giving the office of the mayor of Chicago an annual inflation raise capped at 5%. Lightfoot currently takes in an annual salary of $209,915. That sum would rise to $216,210 as of May 22nd, 2023, according to the ordinance. The proposal will allow the mayor's salary to increase up to 5% every year with a stipulation that the mayor could opt out of the raise. I wonder if Lori Lightfoot would do that. Here, let me think. No. The proposed raise comes as Lightfoot has faced a stream of heated criticism for her handling of violent crime in the city, which has increased 37% compared to 2021. Yeah, the worst thing we could possibly do in this nation is tie a politician's salary to inflation. Because then, if inflation exists, politicians would make more money? No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's a bad idea. And why in heaven's name would Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot want to have a cost of living increase? It's absolutely ridiculous. No, Ms. Mayor, here's the way this works. If your particular political party is responsible for irresponsible economic policy and it fires up inflation to well over 8%, then you have to suffer along with everybody else. Maybe you should have conversations with your fellow Democrats to stop it. Don't you think that would be a good idea? I sure do. Yeah. Actually, what I think we ought to do is, if inflation is the issue, maybe we should have a cost of living deduction based on inflation for politicians. Maybe that would be a good idea. Or, in the case of Lori Lightfoot, maybe what we do is we subtract whatever the percentage of increase in crime in Chicago is. Like, for example, violent crime has increased this year 37% compared to 2021. Perhaps we should take 37% of her salary and use that for overtime for the police department. What do you think? Yeah, that was honestly and straightforwardly, that was actually something that I read today, and I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. Mayor Lori Lightfoot proposing a city ordinance to give herself a raise. You know, I talk a lot about the wrong people being elected, and this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The framers of this nation said that the check and balance between what you do in Congress is that you have to live under the laws that you write or take part in writing. You have to live under those laws. How many laws in the United States of America are currently exempt from members of Congress? The answer is far too many. And then when you consider the fact that only people on the right side of the political spectrum are subject to federal law enforcement in the first place, that's a bad recipe, don't you think? The breaking news is got Herschel Walker's name on it. It's a variation of the October surprise. It's the latest. It's next. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for joining us. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. It's a special phone number just for you. 817-379-2172. Join me if you will, or you can join us on the chat room. By all means, please do so. If you have a comment, opposing viewpoint, anything, share it. I'll be more than happy to listen. This is breaking news from CNN, which, as I point out from time to time, is a biased news source, like Fox News, like several others. A woman who claims, one more thing, when it comes to the last couple of weeks before an election, is there anything like an unbiased news organization aside from this one? The answer is no. They're all biased, but this is CNN, and we all know about CNN. Even CNN knows. They're working to fix it. I wonder if they ever will. Certainly not this time, because they're playing politics with the Georgia Senate race. Let me explain. A woman who claims she was in a years-long romantic relationship with Herschel Walker says the Republican Senate nominee for Georgia pressured her into having an abortion in 1993. She announced it at a press conference today. The woman is being referred to as Jane Doe to protect her identity. She attended the press conference virtually with her lawyer, Gloria Allred. She read her statement. Her voice was heard. Her face was not shown. Doe said she decided to tell her story now to highlight what she has said is Walker's hypocrisy. He has publicly taken the position that he's about life and against abortion under any circumstances, when in fact, he pressured me to have an abortion and personally ensured that it occurred by driving me to the clinic and paying for it. At a campaign event in Georgia prior to the press conference, Walker called the allegation a lie. Quote, "I already told people this is a lie. I'm not going to entertain or continue to carry a lie along. And I want to let you know that I also didn't kill JFK either." Adding the Democrats are doing and saying anything they can to win the Senate seat. CNN has reached out to the Walker campaign for additional comment. The statement from Jane Doe goes as follows, quote, "Herschel Walker is a hypocrite. He's not fit to be a U.S. senator. We don't need people in the U.S. Senate who profess one thing and do another." Herschel Walker says he's against women having abortions, but he pressured me to have one, unquote. She said her romantic relationship began in 1987 when Walker was playing for the Dallas Cowboys. She said she traveled to see him as he was traded to the Minnesota Vikings, then the Philadelphia Eagles. He was married throughout their relationship, she said. Allred exhibited several personal cards she said Walker sent to Doe, signed with the letter H, to refute Walker's claims that he never signed anything that way. In April of 1993, Doe said she became pregnant with Walker's child after discussing the pregnancy with Herschel several times. He encouraged me to have an abortion and gave me the money to do it. I went to a clinic in Dallas but couldn't go through with it. I left the clinic in tears. She lost her nerve and Walker was upset, she said. He then drove me to the clinic the following day and waited for hours in the parking lot until I came out. I was devastated because I felt like I was pressured into having the abortion. Doe said her motives are not political. She says that she is a registered independent and voted for former President Donald Trump. Quote, "I do not believe that Herschel is morally fit to be a U.S. senator, and that's the reason why I'm speaking up and providing proof." Okay. Obviously, this is the October surprise that we've heard so much about, or an October surprise that we've heard so much about. Walker says it's a lie. There can be no court proceedings in time for the election. And I find a few things interesting on this. Okay, so why is this woman protecting her identity? If she believes that Herschel Walker is a danger in the United States Senate and has finally decided that this is so important she had to step up, why didn't she step up? It's not like having an abortion in the United States is considered by at least most of the political left, if not most of the independent voters in the middle. It's perfectly legal and perfectly fine. There's also something else that I'm having a personal struggle with on this. and I brought it up before. Why is a political party that has done everything, fighting tooth and nail for all kinds of arcane ways to do abortion and to keep it legal, moreover, to keep an agency that does most of these abortions continually funded by the government of the United States, why are they trying to make it such a thing that Herschel Walker had a girlfriend who got an abortion? It seems to me that, I just don't understand. I don't understand that. And then to take that hypocrisy and use it to declare that Herschel Walker is guilty of hypocrisy seems like hypocrisy. So would something like this change your vote? I mean, this notwithstanding the fact that, of course, we only send paragons of moral virtue to the Senate. Really? And let me ask you another question. If hypocrisy was a disqualifier for a seat in the United States Senate, would there be anybody in the chamber? I don't think so. So all I can say is that's the news. And I know that it's hard to hear, but that is the news, and I thought I would share it with you. I'm not going to make any more comment than what I've done. I'm going to move on. If you want to make comment, that's okay. I'll be more than happy to listen to you. So Mark Meadows has been ordered by a court to testify in the Georgia 2020 election meddling probe. This also from CNN, a South Carolina judge today ruled that former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows must appear for testimony in the Atlanta Area Grand Jury 2020 election meddling investigation. I'm going to find that the witness is material and necessary to the investigation, and that the state of Georgia is assuring not to cause undue hardship to him, said Judge Edward Miller, who sits on the Court of Common Pleas in Pickens County, South Carolina. Said that at the end of a hearing this morning. The matter was before the South Carolina judge because Meadows now lives in South Carolina, and Atlanta area prosecutors sought an order there compelling his compliance with the subpoena. Meadows will appeal the ruling, according to his attorney, James Bannister. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office, which is leading the special grand jury probe in Georgia, said in court filings there are multiple dates in November when they could accommodate Meadows' testimony. Meadows' arguments for why he should not have to comply with the subpoena were met with skepticism from the South Carolina judge, who questioned the relevancy of some of the evidence Meadows' attorney tried to put forward in the hearing, which lasted less than an hour. Miller also jumped in when a question by Bannister posed to a prosecutor involved the Atlanta probe that suggested a partisan motivation for the investigation. Miller told Bannister, "This is not a political hearing," calling the line of inquiry far afield from the dispute before the South Carolina court. The judge said that some of the legal arguments Meadows was raising were claims that could be considered by other courts, but were not relevant to the decision before him. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis is spearheading the special purpose grand jury into attempts to manipulate Georgia's 2020 election results. The probe was prompted by the infamous call between Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State, in which Trump requested that Secretary Brad Raffensperger find the votes that would secure his victory. But the investigation has grown to include the fake electors plot, the presentation made by Trump allies to Georgia lawmakers that promoted bogus voter claims, and other Trump world machinations from that period. I mentioned the bias on CNN. There it is. Why people would do this, I have no idea. Why they would be so biased in a journalistic effort, I have no idea. Except, of course, they're part of the political machine, and they're being compelled to do so. All right. Well, there you go. So the judge, in my view, is probably correct when he says that a lot of the things that are brought up by Mark Meadows having to do with a grand jury proceeding in Atlanta really don't have anything to do with him. I'm trying to figure out why it is the judge in South Carolina has standing to be able to compel Mark Meadows to testify. And this also comes down to the abridgment of executive privilege that a president has. Mark Meadows, as President Trump's chief of staff, is his primary advisor. The conversations between a president and his primary advisor in private are not official records of the state, nor should they be, and they sure as hell shouldn't be used as a way to try to bring charges against someone when the conversation really didn't lead to anything. All this is political confetti being thrown into the air in an effort to obscure the reality behind the confetti, in my view. It's just my opinion. But I think it's bordering on monstrous now. These district attorneys in cities like Atlanta, they have different fish to fry. They need to start working on crime in their own cities. What's the Attorney General of New York doing trying to stomp on President Trump and the Trump Organization? All they're trying to do is play politics. Is that their job? Is that their job? But the thing boils down for me to executive privilege. If indeed these people want to abridge executive privilege to the point where the president cannot seek advice that may not be held against him in a court of law, then we'll never know what the president's thinking ever again. We'll have no idea. He won't have advisors, at least official ones. Is that what we want? And those people that want to abridge President Trump's executive privilege, you are playing a card and setting a precedent that is going to haunt you. Do you really want the advisors of Joe Biden to be compelled to testify? Do you really want that? Because you're giving away an awful lot of political capital on this one. And you better stop it, because it will haunt you. These precedents are going to stick around for a while. The only thing that's going to save you from those cards being played will be the gutless Republicans that have them in their hand to begin with. If they're more interested in enabling Democrat and leftist policy instead of actually chasing this stuff down and making these kinds of outrageous political moves costly, we're going to keep seeing them. Is this a better country for this or a worse country for this? One last point. You are poking 74 million Americans in the gut with a stick. What are you doing that for? Are you trying to pick a fight? Is that what you're trying to do? That's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. Because sooner or later, at some point, 10, 20, 30 million of those people are going to show up in Washington, D.C. with their American flags and their constitutions only, and they're not going to leave until you resign. Of course, what you could do is pretend they're homeless and, talk about how you have to declare a state of emergency to be able to take care of everyone. Oh, wait. That's only for illegals coming across the southern border, isn't it? Yeah. And then there's this. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' administration did not comply with state public records laws. They must turn over records relating to flights taking migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard, according to a judge. On September 14th, 2 planes picked up 48 migrants in San Antonio, Texas. Did I mention this was also from CNN? Dropped them off at Martha's Vineyard. Their arrival prompted a frantic response that included humanitarian aid provided by locals and assistance from Massachusetts officials, and an immediate relocation to a Massachusetts military base. The next day, DeSantis' office acknowledged it sent the planes, drawing strong reaction from Democrat officials in Florida and the White House. On Tuesday, Leon County Circuit Judge J. Lee Marsh said the governor's office did not show any direct steps taken to gather what this court finds are public records requested by the Florida Center for Government Accountability. The judge gave the administration 20 days to provide the records. CNN has reached out to the governor's office for comment. Okay. So there you go. That's the very latest. And stop. Wow. I told you these last couple of weeks before the election were going to be nightmarish. They're absolutely nightmarish, aren't they? I'm trying to do the best I can to give you the best information that I can. But I understand this is really hard. Hard for me. Back with more in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. It was back in the 80s. Arnold Schwarzenegger was something called a Terminator. And he came back from the future to kill someone that eventually ended a robotic totalitarian regime. Well, I thought maybe in that context, you'd like to see this. Okay? I think it's probably something that you probably ought to see, and so I'm going to show it to you. Check this out. This is a Chinese-made drone. It is landing on a rooftop. Underneath it is a robot dog. Apparently, the robot dog does not have any kind of problems with heights. So this is it landing from a different angle. And you can see the dog huddled underneath there. And if you look on top of the dog as it's detached from the drone and the drone flies away, you will see the dog stand up. Yeah. And he'll turn to the side. And look at that thing mounted on his back. What is that? Why, that's a machine gun. Yeah, that's a machine gun. Last week, Boston University announced that they had been able to graft the spike protein from the Omicron virus to the original SARS-CoV-2 virus and create a virus that killed 80% of the mice that it was tested on. I said at that time, there really does need to be charges of crimes against humanity on those scientists involved, because that kind of research is patently unnecessary. Indeed, incredibly stupid. Now, I don't know exactly why those charges haven't been filed yet, but I just wanted to show you that, to show you what happens when totalitarian regimes have too much time to think and too much money to spend. They just created a robot dog that carries a machine gun. Yeah. So, do we need that? Does the Chinese military need that? You wouldn't think so. They have like 275 million people in their army. That doesn't count the people in the People's Liberation Army Air Force or the People's Liberation Army Navy. I'm just asking. Just thought I'd throw that out there. That was an ugly looking drone, wasn't it? That was a big sucker. Looks like those ugly machines flying through the air in the opening scenes of Terminator, doesn't it? Yeah. So, I am a Texas State Guardsman. Nothing I say about the Texas State Guard or the Texas Military Department has anything to do with either the Texas State Guard or the Texas Military Department. I am speaking totally on my own. I have the privilege of training the next generation of NCO leaders in the Texas State Guard this weekend, which means that I'm going to be off tomorrow and Friday. I will return on Monday. I don't do this often. This happens only about once a year, twice a year sometimes. And I will be back and I will be on the air every day until Election Day. Okay? So make sure you watch whichever platform that you watch this on, and make sure you subscribe so that when we come back on the air, you will know. All right? So we will have all the coverage leading up to and through the 2022 election right here on the Wells Report. And I certainly hope that you're here to share it with me. But like I said, tomorrow and Friday, I will be off. I will be in uniform serving the state of Texas. I've been doing this now, this training of sergeants for 10 years. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been training generations of sergeants. And I have to say that the people that have been in my classes have been some of the best Texans I've ever met. And I dare say, if you're watching this from outside Texas, some of the best Americans you will ever meet. These people serve voluntarily. They will be coming to this class at their own expense, wearing uniforms that they purchase themselves. They're taking time away from their families and their work, burning paid time off, or in some cases, not having paid time off, but serving anyway. And for that, I see that I must show up and give them whatever I can to make them better NCO leaders for the best military force in the state of Texas. Just my opinion, but I say so, and I think so. So if you will kindly excuse me for the next couple of days, and if you will kindly reconvene with me on Monday, I would sincerely appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching the Wells Report. Thanks very much for telling your friends about it. Thank you for putting your money where my mouth is. Thank you for everything you give this broadcast, because I assure you, this broadcast will give you everything I have every single day. See you Monday. Have a good one. Okie dokie. God's blessings on all y'all. I got to get ready. I got to get uniforms ready. I got to get packed. I got to go. So take good care, okay? And by all means, do what I'm going to do. Be safe and make good decisions.